Hello, good morning, friends. Today we are going to start the subject Object Oriented Programming with C++. Myself, Kunal Thanki, lecturer in Computer Engineering Department, Government Polytechnic, Jamnagar. After this presentation, students will be able to understand the difference between procedural oriented programming language and object oriented programming language. They will be able to explain each and every paradigms of object-oriented programming language, and they will be able to enlist applications and advantages of object-oriented programming language. Let's start with the object-oriented programming language. Topics that are going to be covered in this presentation are basic of procedural-oriented programming language, object-oriented programming language, basic concepts of object-oriented programming language, its application, and its advantages. Before we start object-oriented programming language, let's revise what we have learned in C language. As you all know that you have studied C language as a part of your curriculum, C language was based on the concept procedural oriented programming language. You might have an idea that if a larger program is given, right, its complexity is reduced by particularly slicing that program into small chunks known as functions. As you can see over here in diagram, a larger complex program is subdivided into different modules known as functions to reduce its complexity. So this particular approach is known as procedure oriented programming language, where major focus is given on the procedure rather than the data security. If you remember, for an example, suppose if we want to make a calculator, what we were doing is we were writing different functions for addition, for subtraction, for multiplication, for division, instead of clubbing all this functionality into single function, right? So we were developing different modules based on the functionalities. So in procedure-oriented programming language, main focus is given on sequence of things to be done. In other language, we can say that procedure-oriented programming language focuses on the algorithm to be performed for or say for executing any special task. This approach is known as top-down approach, as the complexity lies at the top level, and if you subdivide the complex program in different modules, right, complexity gets reduced. Example of procedure-oriented programming languages are C, COBOL, Fortran, etc. If we look into the characteristic of procedural oriented programming language, as we have discussed, it focuses on procedure rather than on data. So in that programming language, major important factor is how to execute the task rather than to what to execute the task. That means data is not that much important and neither secure in that programming language. Over here, larger program or say complex program is divided into small chunks known as functions or procedures. All the global data available in function can be accessed by different small chunks or different functions, so it does not provide any security for data. It shares global data if we have defined any function, multiple functions, and if we are using global data, each and every functions can access those global data. So this approach is known as top-down approach. In that, no code reusability is there. So if you want to execute any task for more than one time, you have to redefine your code, right? There is no concept of reusability. Over there, user defined data type has limited functionality. What do you mean by that? So in C language, we know that structure is a user defined data type. So if we have defined a structure, for an example, say structure time, in that case, if we have created variable time t1 and t2, we cannot directly manipulate in the way we are manipulating our basic data type. How for an example, we cannot write t1 plus t2 if t1 and t2 are variable of time. For that functionality, we would have to write t1 dot h plus t2 dot h. Directly, we cannot write. So the meaning is we cannot particularly operate our user-defined data type in the similar manner we are operating our basic data type. That was the limitation of uh, procedural-oriented programming. So, what is the conclusion, or say what is particularly its remedy, right? So we can say that object-oriented programming language is particularly fulfilling all the loopholes that were available in procedural-oriented programming language. Over here, main focus is given on data rather than on procedure. So we can say that particularly in object-oriented programming language, more important thing to consider is data rather than an algorithm. So over here you can see into the figure. Over here it accommodates bottom-up approach, means a larger program is constructed by combining small different units or say chunks of an object. These all are known as an object. So complexity lies in the bottom up, and as we go further, we are collaborating multiple objects into particular single module to create different applications. If we see the characteristics of object-oriented programming language, a complex program is made up or say it is decomposed into the smaller unit known as an object. Each object has data members and functions. In previous upcoming presentation slides, we are going to discuss what is an object, what is a class, but over here for simplification, we can say that object is a type of variable, right? So another characteristic is it provides data security. Means over here, whatever the data that is stored inside one object cannot access the data of another object. So it provides data security. It do not allow data to be freely move around the system. So it provides data hiding and data security, and your code is much more secure in comparison with procedural oriented programming language. For an example, we can say C++, C Sharp, Java, all these programming language are object oriented programming languages. Over here, for an example, as we have seen that there can be a different type of objects. Object A data cannot be accessed directly by object B. So this is the example image of particularly data security. Basic concept of OOP. For any programming language to become as object-oriented programming language, it must have to support these all paradigms, or say this all basic concept of object-oriented programming language. We will discuss each one by one. Let's start with classes. In C++, class is nothing but a user-defined data type. In the similar manner, you might have used structure in C language, but the capability of class is way more beyond than the capability of structure. So in structure, what we studied is structure is also user-defined data type, which is a collection of dissimilar data type, right? So in structure, if you have defined structure for time, and you are creating an instance of structure time t1 and t2, you cannot directly manipulate t1 plus t2. But if you have defined the class and you are making an object, or say or a variable of class time, you can easily manipulate time variable t1 and t2 in the similar manner in which you can manipulate your basic data type. So that is the basic difference between class and structure. Both are provided for user defined data type, but the class capability is way more beyond than the structure capabilities. Class has data members as data variables and member functions. So class is a collection of both. It has a data member and member functions to operate upon those data members. We can say that in a class in C++, it's a blueprint representing a group of objects which shares the some common properties and behavior. For an example, we can consider a student. If in our programming we need user defined data type, say student. So as we know that there is no basic data type available in C or C++ with name student, so we can create a class with data type name as student. In student, for an example, there will be data and functions. So there will be a variable known as data in which we can have student name, we can have date of birth for that student, we can also have marks. So in all these three, name, date of birth and marks, are considered as variables or say data members of class student. To operate upon these all data members, we have function. For an example, if we have marks of different subjects, we can calculate total marks, we can calculate average of marks, we can display marks, date of birth and name. So all these three, total, average and display, are known as methods or functions of class of student. Now we will see what is an object. Actually, object is nothing but a real world entity of type class. So if we have made a class, say student, and if there is an entity student 1, then student 1 will be known as an object of type student. Over here, student is a class, which is a user defined data type. So if we are making two entities, student 1 and student 2, both will have own data member values, say name, date of birth and marks. All the students, both the students will have different values. It can be same also, but if the student has initiated particularly memory allocation, even though the values for each and every attributes are similar, their existence will be different in memory allocation. So over here, you can see that student 1 and student 2 are two objects with having particular three data values as name, date of birth and marks, and three member functions to operate upon those data members. Over here, as C++ or say object oriented programming language provides security or say it provides data hiding, we cannot directly interact with all these name, date of birth and mark from outside the class. So to access upon those data members, we have defined over here member functions. Now, how to define a class, how to define member function inside it, how to work with the class, all these things is going to be covered in the next unit, in which we are going to start class with the function, right? So it is prerequisite for you guys to study how to define a function, how to call a function, what is function declaration. All these things should be known to you before we start actually writing code for classes and objects. Now, encapsulation. The encapsulation is also one of the important features that must have to be supported by any programming language if that language wants to become as object-oriented programming language. Now, what is an encapsulation? As we have seen over here, that an object will have or a class will have a data members and member functions, right? So, if we create an object, it binds all these variables as well as methods into single unit, which is known as an object. So particularly the encapsulation term arrived from the term encapsulate. So if we take a real world example of encapsulation, we can consider the capsules that is used for the medication. In capsule, if you open up the capsule, you can find different small particles of the actual ingredient of the medicine. So we are not saying that I am taking 1000 mg particles of paracetamol, right? Rather, if I will occupy a capsule, I will say I have a single capsule for medication, right? So if that capsule bind all this terminology, bind all these small particles into single unit known as a capsule. So in programmatically, we can say that a method, different methods, variables, all are bind together and are making up a single unit known as an object. So this per terminology is known as an encapsulation. Another terminology is a data abstraction. What do you mean by abstraction? So before going into the depth, we can say that data abstraction means displaying only essential informations which are needed to operate upon by hiding all the complexities underneath, right? So for an example, you can consider driving a car. If you are driving a car, you know that what task accelerator is doing, what task clutch is doing, what task brake is doing, but you are not knowing about how actually accelerator performs or how actually brake works, right? You to drive, you should only know that accelerator is used to accelerate the car, brake is used to stop the car, and clutch is used to change the gear. You need not to worry about its underlying complex structure, right? So that is particularly terminology that is meant for an abstraction, data abstraction. So programmatically, if we consider a data abstraction, we can say that including header file, it's another good example of data abstraction. For example, if you are doing any mathematical formula, if you are using any mathematical formula, you are using math.h header file. In that, you are provided with the square root, floor, cell, etc. functions. So if you want to identify a square root, you are passing integer variable or any float variable into the square root function. So you know that square root will give the square root of a variable that you are passing as an argument, but you are not knowing that how actually square root is calculating, right? So in that case, we can say that we all know the functionality of these functions, square root, floor, cell, what they function do, we know very well, but how they are doing that task, we don't know. So that is the terminology known as an abstraction. Next important terminology or important concept that must have to be fulfilled by any programming language to become an OOP is polymorphism. Polymorphism is made up of two words, poly plus morphism, which is a Greek word. So it means that a single item will behave differently in different situation. So item will be the same, single one, but in different situation it will behave differently. For an example, we can say plus sign. So basically plus sign is meant for adding up two numeric values. So for an example, say if I am defining integer I and integer j, I can write I plus j. Either that value can be with decimal point, floating value, or non-floating value. But basically, we can say that plus sign is used for mathematically adding up two values. But if I am using that plus sign with characters, say for an example, if I am using character name first name and character second name, right? If I am writing Kunal plus Thanki, that sign will be used for concatenation of two string variables. So in that case, sign plus is the same sign, but we are taking different functionality from the previous one, right? So that particular terminology is known as polymorphism. Practically, in programmatically approach, there are two type of polymorphism. You will have to study each concept in depth in further upcoming units. But for bird eye view, we can say that polymorphism is of two types: compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism. In compile time polymorphism, particularly decision will be taken at the time of compilation, and in runtime polymorphism, decision will be taken at the time of runtime. So over here, compile time polymorphism is known as static binding or early binding, and runtime polymorphism is known as late binding or dynamic binding. Over here in compile time polymorphism, we can separate these two topics under particular category of compile time polymorphism, function overloading and operator overloading. When we will start with the function, we will also discuss what is function overloading and what is operator overloading. And when we will start the inheritance, we will particularly discuss what is virtual function. Over here, virtual function is a runtime polymorphism. So in depth, we are going to study these all topics in upcoming units. Next important factor, important characteristic of an object-oriented programming language is an inheritance. What do you mean by inheritance? To inherit something means to acquire something from your ancestors, right? So it is a capability of reusability. If we consider inheritance as in terms of programmatic terminology, we can say that object of one class can acquire a property of another class. Now that another class must have to be predefined before. So it must have to be defined before using it, right? So for an example, I have mentioned over here a figure. You can see a father and children, right? Whatever the properties of father, properties in terms of its characteristic, will be inherited by the child, and child will have its own inherited property as well as its own individual characteristics, right? So over here the inheritance particularly provides the code reusability. Instead of redefining it from scratch, you can inherit functionalities and features from previously defined class. So over here we can say that whatever the particular genes and whatever the characteristics of father is there, all those characteristics will be available in both the child, and both the child will have its their own individual characteristics too, right? So this is the best example to particularly explain what inheritance is. There are different type of inheritance. We can say all these things we are going to study in depth in inheritance unit, but for just simplification, we can say that there are five types of inheritance. Single inheritance, in which a class is derived from, or say a class is being inherited from single class. There will be single parent class and there will be single child class. Over here class A, which is predefined, is known as a parent class, and class B, which is being defined from class A, is known as child class. In multiple inheritance, there will be two parent classes from which a derived class will be derived, or say child class will be derived. So over here class C will have properties of class A as well as properties of class B as well as its own class C's own properties. Likewise, if a class A is used by multiple classes, or in other words we can say if multiple classes are being inherited from single class, it's known as hierarchical inheritance. Over here class A property will be distributed in class B, class C and class D. In multi-level inheritance, there will be multi-level hierarchy of inheritance. We can say for an example, class A is a grandparent, class B it's a parent, and class C it's a child. So child will have properties or characteristics from inherited from class B, that is a parent, and also class A, that is grandparent. So that particular hierarchy is known as a multi-level inheritance, and the combination of hierarchical inheritance as well as multiple inheritance is known as hybrid inheritance. How to write a code, how to make this use of all these type of inheritance is going to be covered in upcoming all units that is dealt with inheritance. Next important feature or base paradigms of an object-oriented programming language is dynamic binding. So as we have discussed the term runtime polymorphism in previous slide, it is known as dynamic binding. We were using functions in C language, if you remember, right? So in C language, whenever I am calling a function with function name, it is going to bind with the function definition at the time of compilation, right? So this type of binding is known as static binding, or we can say it as compile time binding. But in dynamic binding, if we are calling a function, there will be multiple definitions for the same function, and which function call should be bind with which function definition. That decision will be taken at the time of running, not at the time of compilation. So it is taking place after the compilation. So it is also known as late binding, or it is also known as dynamic binding. This is also important feature which is available as in terms of virtual function in C++. Next important terminology is message passing. So any programming language, suppose we are providing data security, so there must have to be any mechanism to pass data among two objects. If we omit this functionality, then there will be no case that two modules can interact with each other. So by the mean of message passing, particularly terminology, we are allowing different modules to interact with each other. For an example, if we are calling a function of class, that function is known as a message, and the argument that we are passing over here will be known as an information. So for an example, if employee class is created, the object of an employee will call the function as in terms of by passing message, and what information it needs to pass, it will pass it as an argument. Say for an example over here, name. So message passing plays an important role to provide communication among all particular separate objects, all separate units in object-oriented programming language. Now, if we see the advantage of an object-oriented programming language, we can identify that it provides clear modular structure for programming, because instead of writing complex small programming functions, or say instead of providing smaller modules for simplicity, over here it provides clear modular structure in which each module is doing its own individual task. For an example, we can say if we want to develop a game in which we want to develop a car, in that case, we can, particularly for gaming purpose, we are developing a car, then the code should be written as the car's graphical structure will be identified or will be taken care by another module, its functionality will be taken care by another module, right? So over here we are dividing complex programs in different small objects, so whose task will be individual, right? So it provides clear modular structure, it eliminates redundant code and provide reusability. So for the same example, if we are using C++ or any object-oriented programming language for gaming purpose coding, in that suppose we need to create two cars. So instead of writing code from scratch, what we can do is we can reuse the code. So in that case, we will eliminate the redundant code, that is the duplicated code. We will eliminate that. It also supports data hiding, as we have seen. It provides security and it provides more focus on data. It provides more data hiding. It also deals with real world scenarios. So if you are doing programming in object oriented programming, you can easily accommodate those real world scenario by the mean of object oriented programming, by the mean of an object. So it deals with real world scenario. By the mean of message passing, it allows different objects to interact with each other. So also message passing is an advantage of object-oriented programming language. It also reduces the complexity because it provides the abstraction. So if you are using the functionality of one class by inheriting it, you need not to worry about how actually that class is doing its task. You only need to know what it is doing. So in that case, by the mean of abstraction, it reduces the complexity. These are the advantages of an object-oriented programming language. Next is application of object-oriented programming language. We can say if we want to create a client-server system where the scenario is based on the request response, in that case, we can accommodate application of object-oriented programming language. So we can develop a program in Java, or we can develop a program in C++ which interact with client-server system. Object-oriented database, that is also one of the good application of object-oriented programming language. Instead of storing the data in file, instead of storing data as in terms of a record, we can create a database object, and we can particularly provide data security by creating object-oriented database system. Real-time system design, to deal with real world application, real time application, we can also utilize the power of object oriented programming language to deal with real time system design. Simulation and modeling system, it is also using this kind of applications. For an example, Visual C++, or particularly Visual Code, you can use for developing simulation and modeling kind of structure. Parallel programming is particularly a concept of distributed operating system, also distributed programming, in which you can run parallel programs. So particularly that is also particularly developed by using the object oriented programming language, as well as office automation system. So if you want to define an office automation system, you can deploy your code in object oriented programming language. For an example, you might have seen the screen that is or say an application that is used by medical store operators. So whatever that app is doing, that app is maintaining the stock as well as its particular billing information. So all these informations and all this application is made up with the use of object oriented programming language. So these are the application of object oriented programming language. I hope this will be clear to you. Yeah, just go through the books and go through the topic and go through the video presentation. If you find any query, feel free to contact. Thank you.